I wasn't snooping. Let's start there. It was a Wednesday morning, the kind where you can feel your routine anchoring your whole life. I was digging through Hazel's oversized tote for my phone charger. She always threw our stuff together when we traveled or carpooled. My fingers grazed a small hard edge wedged between receipts and her tablet. I pulled it out without thinking. A red USB stick. Clean, shiny, barely scratched. But what caught my attention was the silver logo stamped across one side. Rosewood Crest. It's the name of a 5-star hotel chain we'd never stayed at together. But I recognized it immediately. I'd seen it in a TV ad once, all draped linens and champagne, the kind of place you go to forget your life back home. I stood there for a moment, USB in hand, my heart giving a strange, unexpected jolt. Hazel and I hadn't traveled together in months. Not since our anniversary weekend at the lake house, which had been fine on the surface but silent underneath. She said she'd been too busy for more trips, leadership coaching, panels, building her brand. And I didn't ask. I never asked. At work, I sat staring at the flash drive for nearly an hour before curiosity won out over the gnawing anxiety. I closed my office door, plugged it into my laptop, and waited. There was a single folder titled Retreat Photos. My palms were sweating. The first photo was harmless. Hazel on a balcony with a sunset in the background. She looked happy, radiant, like someone on vacation, not on a self-development retreat. Then came another. Her sitting at the foot of a massive hotel bed, white robe tied loosely, glass of wine in hand. Her nails painted deep red, the same color she'd worn last weekend when she claimed she was at a meditation retreat out of state. I clicked faster. Photo after photo, all clearly taken in the same luxury hotel room. Her posing near the marble bathroom. Her legs draped across the bed, laughing at something just off camera. My stomach started to knot. And then I saw it. One photo, hazier than the others, taken at an angle where the bathroom mirror in the background captured more than it should have. A man's silhouette, shirtless, toned. He was brushing his teeth or shaving. Some small mundane moment. And it hit me with blunt force. That wasn't me. That man, blurry as he was definitely not me. I just stared. For a long time. At first, I didn't even feel anger. Just this hollow confusion. Like I was watching a stranger's life unravel. My mind raced to justify it. Maybe it was from a bachelorette party years ago. Maybe she stayed with friends. Maybe the guy was her cousin or a friend of a friend. But deep down, I knew. I just knew. I closed the folder and ejected the drive. I sat at my desk for over an hour without moving. My phone buzzed once. Hazel. A text about dinner. Did I want to order out, or should she pick up something? I stared at the screen like it belonged to someone else. When I got home, she acted like nothing had happened. Same breezy tone, same quick kiss on the cheek. She kicked off her heels and complained about a client who wanted to be handheld through a product launch like it was her wedding day. She poured herself a glass of wine, curled her legs under her on the couch, and asked if I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. The surreal part was how completely normal she made everything seem. She didn't flinch. She didn't slip. Later that night, I asked her about the hotel. Just casually. I said I'd seen something on her USB, hoping she'd offer something. Anything that would make this feel like a mistake. Oh, she said, blinking as she stood at the sink. That must have been from that weekend retreat in May. You remember, right? With the company founders summit. She didn't look up from her wine glass. I thought that was in Portland, I said slowly. It was. Well, kind of. Started there. Then we shuttled to another venue for the final day. Fancy place. I think one of the VPs had a deal with the hotel chain. She said it so smoothly, so convincingly, that I nearly believed her. But then she added, "You would have known if you didn't get so buried in work all the time." And just like that, the blade twisted. I asked about the man in the mirror. She didn't miss a beat. That must have been my trainer. You know, they had fitness experts and wellness coaches at the summit. Maybe he walked by. I don't know. Why are you digging through my stuff anyway? She was deflecting hard. She spun it around, turned it into something about me. My lack of curiosity, my habit of checking out, my contentment with a life she considered stagnant. "You don't push for more, Jason," she said, arms crossed. "You're smart. You're capable. But sometimes I think you've just settled. Is that what you want? To stay the same forever?" I don't remember what I said. I just remember standing there, unsure if I should be defending myself or our marriage. She walked away mid-conversation. That was her move now. Drop a grenade, then leave the room. And me? I sat down in the kitchen, stared at the wood grain on the table, and tried to remember the last time we'd touched each other without some subtle transactional undercurrent, like we were acting out the motions of marriage, not living in one. That night, I lay next to her in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many lies had passed between us in that very room. Her breathing was slow, steady. She fell asleep within minutes. Me? I didn't sleep at all. It didn't happen all at once. The suspicion crept in like a slow leak, small signs at first, quiet and easily dismissed. But once I saw the photos, once I heard her spin that story with such composure, I couldn't unsee any of it. I couldn't unhear her voice flattening into deflection. Something cracked in me that night. Something that doesn't mend quickly. From that moment on, I became a quiet observer in my own life. Hazel's routine shifted just enough to notice. She used to leave her phone in the charger across the room. Now it was always within reach, screen facing down, sound off, vibration barely audible unless you were paying attention. Which now I was. If I walked into a room, she locked it with a swipe so casual it could have passed for muscle memory. Her evenings began filling up more frequently. Workshops, she called them. Leadership circles, networking mixers, women in tech panels. She tossed around these phrases like magic keys, things you couldn't challenge without sounding insecure. "It's important for my growth," she'd say, barely looking up from her laptop. "You understand, right?" I nodded the first few times. Of course I did. Who wouldn't support their spouse bettering themselves? But it kept happening. Always at night, always without notice until the last minute. And always dressed like she was going somewhere far more glamorous than a boardroom. I noticed her perfume had changed. She used to wear something soft, lavender or vanilla. Now it was something sharper, musky, bold. The kind of scent you spray when you want to be noticed, not when you're sitting in a circle with other executives eating hummus and cold pita. Her wardrobe followed suit. Blouses turned silkier. Skirts got shorter. Blazers gave way to leather jackets and heels that clacked with an unfamiliar purpose across our hardwood floors. I said nothing, but I watched. I watched how her eyes darted away from mine more often. How the little touches, the hand on my back, the kiss on the cheek, faded into absence. One night, by sheer accident, she left her location services on. I noticed it when I opened our shared calendar on my phone and her icon popped up on the map across town. Not at the university. Not at a tech hub. Not even at a coffee shop. She was at a luxury apartment complex near the waterfront. I zoomed in. It wasn't just once. Her location history traced the same spot several nights in a row. Always after 7 p.m. Never on weekends. Always gone before midnight. I didn't bring it up right away. I wanted to see if she'd offer it herself. She didn't. She came home that night humming a song I didn't recognize, dropped her bag by the door, and kissed me like she'd done something as mundane as picking up groceries. "Good day?" I asked too casually. She smiled. "Productive? Tiring? I need a shower." Then she was gone. And I was left standing in the entryway listening to the sound of the water running upstairs, trying to convince myself that I was overthinking. That this was paranoia. That people grow and change and maybe I just wasn't growing fast enough to keep up. But then something else happened. I started finding receipts. Crumpled at the bottom of her bag, sometimes folded and hidden in jacket pockets. Boutique restaurants, cocktail bars, and a couple of jewelry stores, none of which I had been to with her. Once I found a small, sleek bracelet box shoved behind her scarves in the closet. The receipt was from 3 days prior. It was empty. She didn't wear bracelets. At least not around me. I noticed she no longer mentioned coworkers by name. Everyone became they or a few people. Plans were vague. Descriptions shorter. And whenever I pressed gently, "What's the panel about?" or "Who's hosting the dinner?" she'd answer with a tone that made it clear I was towing the line between curiosity and distrust. "You don't need to know everything," she said one night, brushing past me on her way to the bathroom. I didn't respond. I just stared at the closed door and realized I no longer did know everything. I wasn't even sure I knew anything. One Saturday, she left her iPad on the kitchen table. It buzzed once, then again. I wasn't proud of it, but I picked it up. She never used to have passcodes. Now she did. But it was still synced to our shared cloud. That's when I saw a draft of an email titled, Our Time Together. I opened it before I could talk myself out of it. The message was brief, written in her usual clipped tone. I told you I needed space this week. Jason is starting to pick up on things. We have to be more careful. I'll let you know when the next window is clear. She hadn't sent it yet. Maybe she forgot it was open. Maybe she planned to delete it. But she hadn't. And now I couldn't unsee it. Jason. That's me. Pick up on things. Like I was some stubborn old hound catching the scent too late. I closed the iPad and sat there for a long time, just staring at the floor. That was when it hit me hardest, how far she'd gone to build another life inside ours. How meticulously she'd carved out time, created stories, rewritten her days like a novelist plotting a dual existence. And the worst part? I hadn't noticed. Not until it was already too late. That's the part that haunts you, not the betrayal itself, but the realization that you were walking through a dream while someone else dismantled the foundation beneath your feet. After that, everything she said sounded like fiction. I found myself studying her every move, her pauses when she talked, the way her eyes didn't linger, the hesitation before she answered basic questions. She had become a stranger with my wife's voice. Her detachment wasn't accidental anymore. It wasn't a symptom of stress or burnout. It was systematic, deliberate, complete. That's when I knew. I wasn't losing her. I'd already lost her. I don't know what I expected to find that evening. Maybe a quiet house. Maybe just silence. But I came home early from work that Tuesday, my last meeting got canceled, and for once I didn't tell Hazel. I just drove straight home. The front door was unlocked. Odd, but not unheard of. Her car was in the driveway, and I remember noticing the way it was parked, crooked, like she'd pulled in fast and didn't care. Something about that set me on edge before I even stepped inside. The living room light was on. Her jacket, definitely not mine, was draped over the back of the couch. But it wasn't hers either. It was a dark gray men's blazer. Not one I owned. I stood there staring at it for a full minute like maybe I could imagine it into something else. Then I heard the voices. One was Hazel. The other was male. Muffled, coming from the direction of the bathroom, low and in asterisk mate. Laughing. I couldn't make out the words, just the sound of water running and that low, easy tone people only use when they think they're safe. When they think no one's listening. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm in. I didn't even breathe loudly. I turned around and walked back out the front door like I was on autopilot. My body moving while my mind froze. I drove around for a while, no destination, just movement. I remember the silence in the car felt deafening. By the time I parked on a quiet side street and just sat there, I already knew what I was going to do. I didn't want confrontation. Not yet. I wanted confirmation. That night I started keeping records. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. If I was going to untangle this mess, I needed to see it for what it was. Not just a gut feeling. Not just a missed call or a changed password. I wanted facts. Dates. Times. Patterns. I backed up her messages from our shared cloud access, nothing direct, of course. She wasn't stupid. But there were gaps. Huge, suspicious gaps. Email threads that ended abruptly. Calendar appointments that appeared as private dinner or night meditation session. Everything felt sanitized, like it had been scrubbed just enough to not raise suspicion until you were looking. I installed a camera near our front door. Just a discreet little thing, camouflaged in a porch light. I also checked our router logs. Turns out if someone logs into your home Wi-Fi, you can see what devices are connected and when. The same unfamiliar device, a phone with a model number I didn't recognize, showed up twice in the last week during hours I wasn't home. Next, I requested itemized phone records. Not hers, mine. Our plan was bundled and I had administrative access. Late-night calls to an unknown number. Repeated. Short duration, sometimes just a few seconds. Sometimes minutes. Almost always right after midnight. Always when I was asleep. The picture was coming together and it was exactly what I feared. I hired a service to follow her one weekend. Just 2 days. I told myself if I was wrong, I'd never bring it up. I'd eat the cost and pretend I was paranoid. But I wasn't wrong. The photos arrived in an envelope, no return address. Inside were time-stamped prints, Hazel in sunglasses, holding hands with a tall man in dark jeans. At first, just walking side by side at the outdoor farmer's market she always told me was solo time. Then one at a restaurant. A wine bar downtown where she'd told me she was attending a yoga teacher's networking dinner. Then the one that broke me, her in the passenger seat of his car, leaning in to kiss him through the open driver's side door. Her hand on his cheek like it belonged there. It was dated last Saturday. The same night she texted me that she was reconnecting with herself in silence. When I confronted her, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even sound angry. She was standing in the kitchen making tea. I placed the photo envelope on the counter and slid it toward her. She looked at it for a second, then back at me. "What's this?" "Go ahead," I said. My voice didn't shake. I surprised myself. She opened the envelope and pulled out the pictures. At first, she flipped through them with a blank expression. Then her eyes changed. Her mouth opened like she was about to explain something, but then shut just as quickly. I didn't speak. After a long silence, she said, "You had someone follow me?" "You weren't going to tell me the truth," I replied. Hazel didn't deny it. She just stared at the photos like they were foreign, like they didn't belong to her life. Eventually, she said it wasn't serious. That made me laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that didn't feel like mine. "So you admit it?" She set the photos down gently. "I'm not proud of it, but I didn't feel like I had a choice." That line made me want to scream. But I didn't. I leaned against the wall, hands in my pockets, watching her like I didn't know her anymore. "No choice?" I repeated. "That's what you're going with?" She didn't answer. She picked up her mug, took a sip, and stared into it like it held the wisdom of the universe. "We were growing apart," she said. "You never really listened to me when I talked about what I wanted. And this is what you wanted?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "A guy who hides in our house when I'm gone? A guy you sneak off with while telling me you're at wellness retreats?" Her silence was worse than yelling. She didn't even try to deny it. Eventually she said, "I don't love him. I didn't fall in love with him." I looked her dead in the eye. "That doesn't make it better." She flinched just a little. A tiny tell. The rest of the conversation blurred after that. She tried to explain herself in a dozen ways, none of which I remember clearly. What I do remember is the overwhelming stillness I felt. The kind you get when the fire has already burned through everything worth saving. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just nodded, left the photos on the counter, and walked upstairs to sleep in the guest room. That night, I lay on the too-firm mattress staring at the ceiling, realizing this wasn't the beginning of something falling apart. It had already fallen. I was just the last one to notice. I didn't announce my departure. I didn't pack in a flurry of rage or leave a dramatic note on the fridge. The decision to go came to me like a whisper the morning after she admitted everything. Quiet. Clear. Final. Hazel was still asleep when I left. I stood for a long time at the foot of the bed, watching her breathe steadily under the covers. I tried to summon some feeling, anger, longing, even hate, but there was nothing. Just a deep, numbing calm. I grabbed an old duffel bag, stuffed it with clothes, a few books, and my camera. Then I pulled out the storage bin from the closet and found the keys to my father's cabin. It had sat empty since he passed, deep in the mountains, no cell reception, no neighbors for miles. Just pine trees and silence. It felt right. Before I left, I paused at the doorway. The house looked the same as it always had, framed wedding photos on the wall, the woven rug we picked out together, that ugly vase Hazel's mother had insisted we keep. But none of it felt like home anymore. It felt like a memory I didn't want to remember. The drive took 5 hours. I didn't listen to music. I didn't check my phone. I just drove, window down, wind tearing at my thoughts. I only stopped once for gas and a lukewarm coffee I barely drank. The cabin hadn't changed. Same creaky porch, same stubborn front door that took a hip bump to open. Dust blanketed everything inside, but the smell, cedar and old leather, was like an old friend. I lit a fire, unpacked my bag, and sat down on the couch my dad built with his own hands. The quiet wasn't jarring. It was welcome. After months, maybe years, of living under low-level emotional noise, the silence felt like oxygen. For the first 2 days, I did nothing. No emails. No calls. Just long walks through the woods, coffee on the porch, and staring at the stars. I read old journals my dad had kept. I ate canned soup and stale crackers. I didn't care. The third day, I found our wedding album buried in the bottom of my bag. I don't remember packing it. Maybe I brought it hoping to feel something. Maybe part of me still needed to grieve. I flipped through the pages slowly. Hazel looked beautiful in every *T, timeless, confident, untouchable. I looked happy. So damn happy. I didn't recognize that version of myself anymore. There was one photo I lingered on. Us dancing, her forehead resting against mine, our eyes closed. At the time, I thought it meant in *Macy. Now I wondered if we were both just avoiding eye contact. Later that night, I pulled out a USB drive, that USB drive. I went through the photos again, not to punish myself, but to study them. Not the obvious ones, but the background. The tone. The body language. Her smile was different in those hotel photos. Less posed. More, alive. And that crushed me in a way nothing else had. I had been there the whole time. Present, loyal, working long hours to build a life. But somewhere along the way, Hazel had stopped seeing me. Or maybe I'd stopped seeing her. Maybe we both stopped looking. The next morning, I found a box in the back of the closet. Inside were old photos from when we first dated, Polaroids, ticket stubs, little notes we used to leave each other. One said, "Don't forget how rare this is." Hazel had written that. I remember thinking it sounded dramatic at the time. Now it just felt cruel. I spent that entire day walking. There's a ridge about a mile from the cabin with a view that makes you feel small in the best way. I sat there for hours watching the sun arc across the sky. It was the kind of view that demands honesty. So I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. Had I been truly happy? The answer hurt. No. Not for a long time. There had been moments, sure. Laughter, comfort, shared dreams. But the slow erosion had been happening for years. Her growing ambition. My preference for stillness. We had stopped aligning, and instead of talking about it, we both just adapted. We got good at playing roles. Her, the high achiever with no time to slow down. Me, the grounded one who never asked for more. It worked. Until it didn't. What Hazel did was unforgivable, yes. But what we both did was unspoken. We stopped choosing each other. Every day, you either renew the commitment or you let it wither. We let it wither. At night, I'd sit by the fire and just listen. To the crackling wood. To the wind outside. To my own breath. It sounds poetic now, but in the moment it felt raw. Like I was peeling back layers I didn't know I had. After a week, the calls started. Missed notifications. Voicemails. All from Hazel. I didn't answer. Not out of pettiness, but because I knew I wasn't ready. She didn't need me to react. She needed me to return. To reset the cycle. Instead, I let the silence stretch. I journaled. Something I hadn't done since college. Pages and pages. Sometimes angry rants, sometimes reflections that made me cry. I wrote letters to myself, letters to her I never intended to send. One ended with the words, "You left long before you ever walked away." On the 10th day, I found a USB cable and transferred everything to a backup folder labeled Past. That's where I left it. No longer on my desktop. No longer ready to open on a whim. The final night, I burned the last of the old wood in the fire pit. I tossed in the scarf Hazel had left in my car last fall, the one that still smelled like her. I watched it curl and blacken, the fabric folding into itself like it was trying to disappear. That was the closest thing to closure I ever got. The next morning, I left the cabin before dawn. I didn't say goodbye to the place. I just packed my bag, locked the door, and drove down the winding gravel path into the fog. I didn't know where I was headed yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like the road belonged to me. I was back in the city for less than 24 hours before Hazel found a way to reach me. I'd rented a small apartment across town, a furnished unit in a nondescript brick building with creaky floors and thin walls. I wanted a space that didn't remind me of anything. No wedding photos. No wine glasses that came in pairs. Just me, some secondhand furniture, and a view of the alley where the neighbor's cat held daily standoffs with a squirrel. The first thing I saw when I stepped inside was the package at my door. No return label. Just my name in her handwriting, the same way she used to write it on birthday cards or sticky notes left on the fridge. Inside was a small Tupperware container of chicken enchiladas, my favorite, or at least it used to be. Beneath it, a neatly folded note. Thought you might be tired of takeout. Hazel. I put it in the fridge and forgot about it. The next day, it was still there. I didn't touch it. That week, the messages started. Voicemails. Emails. A few texts. Nothing dramatic. No begging. Just carefully curated memories. She brought up the trip we took to Santa Fe, the night we watched the meteor shower from our rooftop. She reminded me of the playlist we used to fall asleep to. She attached old photos, ones I hadn't seen in years. Us laughing, wine in hand. Her curled into my side under a blanket. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She framed it like reflection. Then came the printed letter, slipped under my door in a white envelope with no postage. It was handwritten, 5 pages, and it read like a confession mixed with a PR release. Emotional. Articulate. But controlled. She said she missed the way I listened when she spoke. The way I made space for her. She admitted to betraying that. She acknowledged how far she had gone to avoid feeling small and how she resented me for not chasing more even though I never claimed to want what she wanted. She wrote, I confused ambition with value. I thought if you didn't want to climb, you didn't care. That wasn't fair to you. Then came the qualifiers. You weren't present. You retreated into comfort. You gave up on wanting more. There it was. The balance. The ledger of blame. A little ownership, a little accusation, just enough to suggest this was a shared collapse. I didn't write back. A few days later, I came home to find another small box waiting. Inside was the worn navy sweater I used to wear on rainy days, the one that had gone missing months ago. Folded inside was a flash drive labeled Reminders. I nearly threw it away. Instead, I plugged it in. It was a video, a montage of clips from our life. Footage I didn't know she had taken. Me cooking breakfast, us dancing in the living room, her laughing as I tried to fix a leaky faucet. The music playing softly in the background was one of our old favorites. I sat through the whole thing. At the end, she appeared on screen. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes red. "Jason," she said, "I don't know what happens next. I just needed you to know I remember. That's all." I didn't cry. I didn't feel much of anything, honestly. There was something so curated about it all. Like watching someone audition for a role they'd already lost. After that, it became routine. Every few days, something new would show up. A bag of my favorite coffee beans. A book she knew I loved with a fresh bookmark tucked inside. A framed photo of our dog who now lived with her, resting on his back with his legs in the air. It wasn't the gifts that got to me. It was the precision. The way each one landed like a reminder of what she had once meant to me and who she had once been. But that's the thing. It all felt rehearsed. Too on point. Like she wasn't fighting for me, not really. She was fighting for her place in a story she no longer controlled. For the ability to say, I tried. Maybe even to convince herself that what happened was forgivable, not because she was sorry, but because she didn't want to live with the version of herself that had done it. One night, I came home to find a painting leaning against my door. A small canvas, abstract, messy blues and grays with streaks of gold. Hazel used to paint when we first met. Said it helped her clear her head. She stopped after the startup took off. The note attached read, "I remembered how this used to make me feel. You inspired that, even if I forgot for a while." I brought it inside. I didn't hang it. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I started therapy. It wasn't about fixing the marriage. I already knew that was over. It was about understanding why I felt so hollow even after leaving something that had clearly died. My therapist, Alex, a soft-spoken guy with wire-rimmed glasses, helped me unravel that. "You're grieving the idea of her," he said once. "Not the reality." He was right. The woman I was mourning wasn't the one who wrote me letters or sent me montages of our dog. It was the one I thought I married. The one I believed would never leave emotionally without physically walking out the door. Hazel hadn't reached for me in months, years, maybe. And when she finally did, it wasn't because she missed me. It was because she missed the control. The comfort of knowing she could be forgiven. That was the part she couldn't stand. Not my absence. Her powerlessness. It dawned on me then, none of these gestures were about building a future. They were about rewriting the past. I stopped opening the packages. Eventually, they stopped coming. She got the message, or maybe she just ran out of memories to offer. But by then, I had already let go. A month passed before I returned to the city in full. Not to the house Hazel and I once shared, but to a different version of my life, one that had nothing to do with her. I signed a lease on a downtown loft, small but bright, with tall windows and exposed brick walls that made me feel like someone new. I didn't bring much with me. Just the essentials. No old photo frames. No anniversary mugs. No ghosts. I also accepted a job offer I hadn't seen coming. A leadership role at a tech foundation I'd worked with before, this time on their innovation board. It was the kind of opportunity Hazel always said I never chased. I took it quietly. Not out of spite. Not to prove anything. Just because it felt right. Like I was stepping into the version of myself that had been waiting beneath the rubble. A few weeks later, an article popped up online. Jason R., named Director of Innovation, a new era of collaboration begins. It had my picture, a short quote, and a few paragraphs about my work ethic and background. A mutual friend reposted it on LinkedIn. That's probably how Hazel saw it. I wasn't there, but I can imagine the moment. Maybe she was sitting in some trendy cafe, sipping her third espresso, half-scrolling. Maybe she blinked when she saw my name, reread the headline twice. She reached out again, of course. A new number. A different email. Just a short message. "Proud of you. You deserve it. Always knew you would." I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't owe her that part of me anymore. Eventually, I went back to the house. Not out of nostalgia. Just to pick up the last of my things. A few books, a guitar I hadn't touched in years, and some documents I'd left in the office drawer. Hazel was home when I arrived. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me, though we hadn't spoken in weeks. Her eyes searched mine for something: anger, regret, hope. I didn't offer any of them. Hey, she said, soft. Hey, I returned. We didn't talk much. Just walked quietly through the space like strangers browsing a museum that used to mean something. I packed the last box slowly. She hovered in the hallway but didn't interrupt. Before I left, I placed one item on the kitchen table, our old anniversary photo, the one she once kept in a silver frame. I didn't say anything about it. I just left it there, face down. She watched me from the doorway as I picked up the box. We exchanged one final glance. No rage, no tears, just an unspoken acknowledgement of what was lost. And then I walked out. She didn't follow. Behind me, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Not an ending. Not quite a new beginning. Just the truth. Finally allowed to breathe.